Picture this. Tuesday night, Moscow's freezing, and we're sitting here talking about modern aristocracy. Not the kind with coats of arms, the kind with 3 syllables plastered all over LinkedIn and conference badges. You know the one. The secret handshake of Russian tech, the velvet rope password. Everyone's hoping it works magic. But does it?
Ex-Yandex, the Russian tech world's own old Etonian. Except instead of rowing, you debugged production at 2 a.m.
Ex-Yandex. I swear, the way people say it, you'd think they got knighted at the Kremlin. But here's the reality check. Yandex has 32,000 people on payroll, with turnover rumored at 1/4 in some teams. Do the math. Half of Russian IT has done a tour there. So ex-Yandex? That's ex-rider of the Moscow metro territory. Technically correct. Not exactly a blue plaque moment.
We don't put that on our resumes, do we? Although, maybe we should. Ex-metro rider, Sokolnicheskaya line, 2003 to 2008. Survived the great air conditioning drought.
Update your LinkedIn. Ex-Yandex, ex-metro, ex-hopeful dreamer. That's the full Russian tech pedigree right there.
Honestly, that's more impressive than half the LinkedIn endorsements I've seen.
It is. Anyway, hi, I'm Gregory.
And I'm Dina. Today, we're not tiptoeing. We're taking a scalpel, maybe even an axe, to Russian IT. The myth, the reality, and the yawning chasm in between. Spoiler, it's not a gap, it's a geological fault line.
And we're not here to be gentle. If you're looking for comfort food, wrong podcast. This is more cold shower than spa day.
Us? Gentle? Not since the Neolithic. If you want gentle, go find a podcast about sourdough starters.
Welcome to Sunrise Outlawed. Stories from Russia. Today, the myth, the money, and the men with the golden shares. All right, Dina, let's take a stroll into legend. Russian tech, myth-making at its finest. And look, Russia actually did turn out some world-class tech, no question. Take Nginx. At its peak, running 1/3 of the internet. Netflix, Dropbox, probably half the apps on your phone. Nginx is the silent engine under the hood. Built in 2002 by Igor Sisoyev, coding away at Rambler, Russia's answer to Yahoo, just with more snow and way less jazz hands.
And a very early answer at that. Rambler, 1996. So early, it was practically dial-up aristocracy.
Exactly. Next up, Kotlin, the programming language humming inside 95% of the world's top 1,000 Android apps. 5 million developers swear by it. All courtesy of JetBrains.
And then ClickHouse, right? That's the database with the bonkers growth numbers.
Exactly. ClickHouse, worth $6.35 billion. Clients? Microsoft, Cisco, Spotify, Tesla, Anthropic, the usual suspects.
And don't forget Telegram.
Telegram, 1 billion monthly users. And here's the stat that always blows my mind. About 30 full-time employees. 30. That's not a head count. That's a dinner reservation. You could fit the whole company at one table.
30? That's not a head count. That's a dinner reservation.
Quite possibly the most ruthlessly efficient tech company ever built. Where Elon Musk laid off 80% of Twitter to prove you could run lean, Durov just started lean and never hired the extra weight in the first place.
So Ford's great insight was, make it simple, make it repeatable. Durov's great insight was, make it simple, and never hire anyone in the first place.
And then there's Veeam, the global leader in enterprise backup, used by 3/4 of the Fortune 500, valued in the billions.
Miro, too. 99% of the Fortune 100 use it, right? And valued at $17.5 billion.
Playrix, the 3rd biggest mobile game studio on the planet. Their revenues? Bring an abacus and a strong cup of tea.
EPAM. Technically Belarusian, but always lumped in with the Russian tech story. S&P 500. $5 billion in revenue. 60,000 employees.
So yes, the talent is real. The products are real.
But Gregory, each of those examples is actually a plot twist in disguise. Nginx? It only really took off after Sysoyev left Rambler and open-sourced it.
And then F5 Networks, an American company, snapped it up for $670 million.
Kotlin? JetBrains has always been based in Prague, not Moscow.
Telegram? Durov had to do a runner after the government came for vKontakte.
ClickHouse? Born at Yandex, but only flourished after it escaped Russian gravity altogether.
Miro moved to Amsterdam. Veeam is Swiss, neutral both in cheese and in headquarters. Playrix? The founders are worth $11 billion, but you'll need a telescope to spot them anywhere near Russia.
So every so-called Russian tech triumph, it's actually an escape story. These products didn't succeed because of Russia. They succeeded the moment they left.
So, here's the big one. Yandex. If you're outside Russia and only know the name from LinkedIn profiles, Yandex isn't just a search engine.
It's the whole buffet, right?
At its peak, NASDAQ-listed $30 billion colossus. Trying to be Google, Uber, Amazon, and Alexa all rolled into one. Search, maps, ride-hailing, food delivery, cloud, e-commerce, a voice assistant called Alisa.
And it wasn't alone in that ambition, was it?
Sber, Russia's state-controlled banking giant, the country's biggest by a mile, decided around 2019 that running everyone's salary account wasn't enough. Voice assistant, AI, streaming, delivery, e-commerce, the full super app stack.
For a few feverish years, Russia had two corporate titans racing to become WeChat.
Two super apps enter, one regime survives. But let's not skip ahead. Let's start with the search engine. Credit where it's due. Not every country builds its own. France? No. Germany? Nine. The UK? Not a chance. Russia? Somehow, yes. That's a feather in the Ushanka.
But, and you knew there'd be a but.
But, actually, two buts, because we like to be thorough. First, would Yandex search have survived on merit alone? Russian search share is a politically loaded number. Yandex's own stats and Western trackers disagree by 15, 20 points.
So how do we tell who was actually winning?
Skip the methodology fights. Look at where searches actually happen. By 2020, roughly 3/4 of Russian smartphones ran Android, another quarter iOS, which means Google sat as the default search engine on virtually every phone in the country.
And search is increasingly a mobile activity.
Exactly. Google's distribution advantage was real and acknowledged by Russian regulators themselves. In 2015, Yandex filed an antitrust complaint. In 2017, Russia's Federal Anti-Monopoly Service forced Google to settle.
Settle on what?
A choice screen. Every Android sold in Russia had to let users pick their search engine instead of just defaulting to Google.
And before that screen appeared?
Google held about 60% of search on Android in Russia.
And a year after?
Yandex pulled even, 49% each. Real competition, for a little while, with a referee watching.
And then 2022.
Sanctions, Google packs its Russian operation along with everything else Western. The Android default is still Google globally. The company just stops servicing Russia.
Choice screens stop mattering when one of the two choices has left the building.
And Yandex's share leaps. By 2025, over 2/3 of Russian search, by every measure. Yandex didn't beat Google. The law and geopolitics just handed it the keys.
And it wasn't even the first move, right?
Back in 2014, Russia passed a data localization law. All personal data on Russian citizens must be stored on servers physically in Russia. On the surface, data sovereignty. In practice, every company had to build local infrastructure the state could access.
LinkedIn refused. Got blocked in 2016. Still is.
Everyone else complied. So by the time the real crackdown came, the plumbing was already in place. The state had the pipes. It just needed to turn the taps.
And the second but?
Search is technology, yes. But is it a tool for making things? Not really. Search is an advertising business. Clicks, banners, the digital equivalent of billboards on the Garden Ring.
And Yandex tried to export it, didn't they?
To Turkey. Spent years at it. Failed heroically. The technology was there. The ecosystem was not.
So even the genuine achievement is a domestic consumer product, not an exportable tool. A palace with no doors leading out.
And that's the core paradox. Brilliant people, brilliant products, but all perched way up at the tip of the pyramid. A search engine? Nice. A voice assistant? Lovely. But honestly, you can live with slightly worse search.
What you can't live without?
Payment infrastructure, databases, dev tools, the unglamorous bricks at the base. Russia built the penthouse and forgot the foundation. And now the building's swaying in the breeze.
So it's not that there's no ecosystem, it's just upside down. The flashy bits are all marble and chandeliers, but the load-bearing walls? IKEA flat pack, made abroad, missing half the screws. Hope you kept the Allen key.
Exactly. And that's the question. Not, is Russia talented? Obviously, yes. But why didn't that talent ever pour the concrete? Why no Russian Stripe, no Russian Vercel, no Russian GitHub Actions?
No tools to build tools. Just tools to impress dinner guests. Marble lobby on rented land. Print it on a t-shirt and sell it at the next tech conference.
Exactly. And on that existential note, time for a musical interlude while we all ponder why Russia builds penthouses without foundations. All right, here's where we separate the sizzle from the steak. Russian tech is famous for its dazzling consumer products, genuinely world-class, no question. Take the Tinkoff banking app. So slick you'd swear it was smuggled in from California. I've used it to buy US stocks right from Moscow. The interface was smoother than most Western apps I've tried.
Yandex Taxi, too. Honestly, it's as good as Uber. Maybe better, at least in Moscow.
Ozon, Wildberries, heavyweight e-commerce. No joke, these are the Amazon knockoffs that actually deliver.
Wildberries. Started in 2004, right? With just $700 and Tatiana Bakalchuk's stubbornness.
She became Russia's richest woman, by the way. Move over, Jeff Bezos. Tatiana did it in rubles.
Russian banking apps. Honestly, the UI is jaw-dropping. I've seen Westerners question their life choices after using one.
Absolutely. And then there's Alisa, Yandex's voice assistant. Tens of millions use it. It's in smart speakers, people's homes, everywhere. And it works in Russian, a language with more exceptions than a Moscow traffic jam.
And people adore it. Every parent I know has one. Alisa reads bedtime stories, answers the barrage of kid questions, runs timers for homework.
A digital nanny.
Minus the judgmental looks. Whether she's also quietly taking notes for the FSB, well, let's just say, nobody's not thinking about it.
So, on the surface, Russia looks like a tech powerhouse. Beautiful apps, groceries at your door in 15 minutes, a voice assistant that actually works.
But here's the kicker. Does any of this help build a business? Or create the next unicorn?
Exactly. Can that gorgeous Tinkoff app export anything except envy?
Nope. They're all end-user products, built for consumption. These are the pastries on the tray, not the bakery that makes them.
That brings us to the big myth. The narrative, pushed by officials, that IT will become the engine of the Russian economy, replacing oil.
And you're, how do I put this, skeptical.
Deeply. Not because people aren't brilliant, they are. But let's talk about directionality.
Directionality? That sounds ominous. Is there a test for that?
Meaning, which way does the technology point? Your banking app is dazzling, but does it make Russian manufacturing better? Groceries at your door in a flash. But does that help a biotech startup build the next vaccine?
No, everything points at the consumer. It's like a compass that only knows me, me, me.
Everything points inward. Nothing points outward, toward production, toward actually building.
For IT to actually drive an economy, it's got to be a force multiplier, right?
Exactly. You need tools that make other sectors more productive. Russia's IT is a service layer, not a production layer.
Are we being unfair? Maybe we've cherry-picked the big names and missed a thriving mid-tier?
I wish, but the numbers don't lie. IT's share of Russian GDP? About 2.7%. In the US? Closer to 10. Israel? 17. Russia's nearly 4 times behind America, more than 6 times behind Israel. So the companies we just listed, Yandex, Sber, the handful of survivors, that's not the tip of the iceberg. That is the iceberg.
It's a 5-star hotel built on rented land. Marble lobby, beautiful rooms. But the landlord can evict you overnight. And overnight, they did.
And none of this is a fluke. There are structural reasons. First, the economy itself. Russia has far fewer small and medium businesses than the West. Instead, it's dominated by Goliaths and the state.
So there's no customer base for dev tools, no ecosystem of mid-sized companies hungry for B2B software.
Right. Second, capital. Venture capital peaked at $2.4 billion in 2021, and by 2025 had collapsed to $146 million. That's a 94% drop-off.
94%? That's not a correction. That's an extinction event.
From $2.4 billion to $146 million in just 4 years. And even before the collapse, most of that money chased consumer plays. Food delivery, fintech, marketplaces. Not infrastructure, not dev tools. Always pastries over power tools.
Because that's where the quick returns were. Cupcakes now. Infrastructure, maybe, someday.
Exactly. Third, the oil curse. When your economy runs on resource extraction and the state budget is stuffed with oil and gas money, there's no urgency to build real tech infrastructure. Everyone lounges on resource rent, admires their banking app's pretty UI, and pretends it's Silicon Valley in snow boots.
I remember this so well. Look at our Spare app. Look at our delivery speed. As if a slick logistics UX is the same thing as building the future.
And the result? A market that dazzles from the outside, but is hollow underneath. When the government finally mandated a switch to domestic software, we'll get to those numbers, the sector discovered it simply didn't have the products. And this lack of infrastructure made the next act so devastating. Because what left Russia in 2022 wasn't just companies. It was the thin, and I mean wafer-thin, layer of B2B capability. So, February 2022. And then, boom, history happens. The headline everyone remembers: 100,000 IT specialists gone in the first wave.
And some estimates go way higher, right? Depends who you ask and what you count.
Exactly. By 2024, the estimates balloon from 100,000 up to nearly 350,000, depending on who's counting. The government says 2/3 came back. But independent researchers, like RANPA, who surveyed 3,500 immigrants, put the return rate closer to 10%.
10% versus 66. That's not a margin of error. That's a whole different planet.
And the truth, no surprise, doesn't sit neatly in the middle. But it's a lot closer to 10 than to 66.
But let's treat that number with care. There were really 2 migrations happening at once. The mobilization wave, September 2022, was pure panic. People bolted for Kazakhstan, Georgia, Armenia, Turkey, anywhere with open borders and Wi-Fi. A lot came back, some after months, some after weeks. So when you hear the government boasting, Most emigrants returned. They mostly mean this group.
Right. But the IT migration? That was a totally different beast. It was deliberate, almost surgical. These were people with options. Remote jobs, international employers, bank accounts in currencies that didn't deflate overnight. They didn't just bolt for the border. They relocated. Dubai, Cyprus, Berlin, Lisbon. Families in tow, kids in new schools, leases signed. Not a dash, more like a permanent departure lounge.
But there's a split inside that group nobody talks about enough.
Go on.
Some left and cut ties completely. New employers, new jurisdictions, new tax residency. The clean break crowd.
And others kept working for Russian companies remotely. Same task board, same stand-ups, same salary in rubles, just now from a cafe in Tbilisi instead of an office in Moscow. Physically abroad, professionally still inside.
That's a very different kind of emigration.
You've moved your body, but not your career. From the outside, it looks like brain drain, but a lot of that brain is still plugged into the same socket. And it's a precarious position, dependent on a Russian employer, paid in a currency you can't control, no local network to fall back on.
And if the company says, "Come back or you're out,"
You're out, which is exactly what started happening. Yandex has been quietly, almost passive-aggressively, pressuring people back, downsizing foreign offices, cutting headcount abroad, making it very clear remote from abroad is no longer on the menu.
so some trickled back.
Mostly the ones who had no real choice, not a wave of homesick expats. And for the people who'd made the clean break, new employer, new country, there was nothing to come back to. Which brings us to what really matters. Because the story isn't just about individuals packing suitcases, it's about what left at the institutional level. More than 1,000 foreign firms publicly curtailed or quit Russia. Combined enterprise value north of $150 billion walked out the door. And the companies that left weren't random.
JetBrains, EPAM, Veeam, Luxoft, DataArt, Miro, Abby, Semrush.
Exactly. That's the builder layer, the ones who made the tools everyone else used.
You're reading a eulogy, Gregory. Cue the church bells and the slow fade out.
It really does feel like a eulogy, doesn't it? And notice what unites these companies: B2B specialists, developer tools, business infrastructure, the platforms everyone else built on. The consumer-facing companies mostly stayed: Yandex, Sper, Ozon, Wildberries. But the builder layer?
Left the building. Completely. Not even a forwarding address.
And this is where mixing up individual brilliance with sector strength gets dangerous. When people say Russian IT is strong, they usually mean, look at all these brilliant Russians at Google, Meta, AI labs, startups in Berlin and London.
And yes, they are brilliant.
But that's emigrant talent, not sector output. It's like bragging your hospital is world-class because all your best doctors moved to America.
But hang on. Is that totally fair? There are people who stayed and are still doing serious work. Not everyone who left is a genius, and not everyone who stayed is second-rate.
No, you're absolutely right. Some brilliant people stayed. Individual stories are all over the map. But here's the structural point. The sector lost disproportionately from the top. GitHub tracked Russian developers after 2022. By November, 11% had listed a new country. In a normal year, it's under 3%, just the usual job churn, 4 times the baseline. But the crucial finding wasn't the percentage, it was the quality. The developers who left were, in the study's words, significantly more active and central in collaboration networks.
Russia didn't lose a random cross-section. It lost the crown jewels.
Exactly. And you could even see it on GitHub. Georgia's developer population jumped 94%, Armenia up 42%, Cyprus 60%. Those numbers aren't census data, they're GitHub updates.
For a developer, updating your GitHub profile is basically filing a change of address with the universe.
And here's a comparison that tells the whole story. Nebius. Dina, you know what Nebius is?
The international bit of Yandex that split off, right? The one that escaped?
Exactly. When Yandex split in 2024, the international assets became nebulous, listed on NASDAQ, doing AI infrastructure, cloud, B2B tools. In other words, exactly what Russia needed most.
And the domestic Yandex? The one left behind?
Sold at a state-mandated discount. We'll get to that in a second. Meanwhile, Nebius, the bit that escaped, peaked at nearly $30 billion on NASDAQ. Even after the tech stock roller coaster, it's still worth more than the domestic Yandex ever was. The piece that got away is worth 5 times more than the one that stayed.
That's not a metaphor. That's a balance sheet. And it's in bold.
It's both. So the question is, what's left? Who stayed?
The state, with a capital S. The big S.
Exactly. Yandex, restructured, new ownership. Sber, always a state bank, now moonlighting as a tech company. VK, handed off to Gazprom-adjacent structures.
And the rest? Rostelecom and a handful of mid-sizers.
Rostelecom, a smattering of mid-size firms, all living in a world where over half of IT demand now comes from the government or its satellites. 1 trillion rubles in government IT procurement in 2024 alone.
That's not a market. That's a waiting room at a ministry.
That's a ministry with a search bar.
So from we compete with Google to we're the digital department of Gazprom. In 2 years flat.
In 2 years. And the mechanism for that, how the state swallowed the whole sector, is its own saga, with some very specific characters. So, how do you capture an entire tech sector? Not with old-school nationalization, too blunt, too Soviet. Not nearly enough plausible deniability. Modern Russia prefers the leveraged buyout. But here, the leverage is political muscle, and the down payment is a healthy dose of existential dread.
And of course, there's always a golden share, like a villain's business card. You know trouble's coming when someone starts waving that around.
Always a golden share. Let's use Yandex as our case study, the template for the whole playbook. 2009. Sberbank acquires a so-called golden share in Yandex for the princely sum of €1. €1. That's not even enough for a metro ticket.
That's barely enough for a metro ticket.
Exactly. But it gave them veto power over any foreigner buying more than 25% of Yandex. Just a tiny foot in the door, or so it seemed.
The foot in the door. The slipper left at the ball.
The foot in the door. Then, 2019, the golden share quietly migrates from Sberbank to something called the Fund of Public Interests.
Which I'm sure is very public-spirited.
Of course. And presto, the rules tighten. The threshold drops from 25% to 10%. The fund can appoint 2 out of 12 board directors. It even gets the power to temporarily remove the CEO.
Temporarily. Like a Russian winter. You know when it starts, but not when it ends.
Then, 2022. The EU puts Yandex's founder, Arkady Volozh, on the sanctions list. He steps down as CEO, technically voluntary, practically inevitable.
And the endgame?
2024. The international holding is forced to sell its Russian assets to a consortium for $5.4 billion, even though the market cap is $10 billion.
A 50% haircut.
Courtesy of the state. The company was dismembered in broad daylight, with the bill handed to the shareholders. You couldn't ask for a cleaner heist in a Bond movie.
And who's in this merry little consortium?
Here's where the plot thickens. 35% goes to a Yandex management fund, about 50 top managers buying in. 25% to Alexander Chachava of Lida Capital, 15 each to Lukoil and to a man named Pavel Pras, and 10% to Alexander Ryazanov. The whole consortium, pointedly described in the press as including associates of Yuri Kovalchuk.
Kovalchuk. Now there's a name you don't want seeing on your caller ID.
Yuri Kovalchuk, chairman and biggest shareholder of Bank Rossiya, the bank of the Russian elite. They call him Putin's personal banker. Journalist Mikhail Zygar says he's basically the second most powerful figure in Russia.
And his brother? Because there's always a brother.
Mikhail Kovalchuk runs the Kurchatov Institute, Russia's flagship physics outfit. Between them, the brothers already controlled finance, science, and the country's biggest media holding. With the Yandex deal, technology joined the portfolio.
So the mafia isn't just running the restaurants anymore. They've opened a culinary school and given themselves Michelin stars.
That's not far off. And yes, they gave themselves Michelin stars. The same pattern repeats at VK, Russia's Facebook, over 100 million users.
When did the takeover happen?
December 2021, 2 months before the invasion, which tells you something. Gazprom-linked entities ended up with 57% of voting shares.
And the new CEO?
Vladimir Kirienko, age 37, son of Sergei Kirienko, first deputy chief of the presidential administration, senior VP for media strategy. Stepan Kovalchuk, Mikhail's grandson, Yuri's great-nephew.
It's not a company, it's a family reunion with stock options. Board meeting or birthday party? Hard to tell.
And the results speak for themselves. VK's 2024 financials, $1.5 billion in revenue, $1 billion in losses, nearly triple the year before. An emergency equity raise just to avoid default.
In any normal market, that's a CEO firing, shareholder panicking moment. Here, it's Tuesday.
But when the state is your shareholder, normal is optional.
So the state takes over the company, installs the children of officials, loses $1 billion, 95 billion rubles, and then, what, throws a party?
And then continues. Because the goal was never profitability. The goal was control. The losses? Just a rounding error in the ledger of power.
When a company stops being market-driven, everything starts looking like a government ministry. I've seen it up close.
What changes first?
The culture. Transparent reviews get murky. Meritocracy morphs into loyalty tests. The org chart starts to look suspiciously like a general's chain of command.
And that cultural shift isn't just Yandex or VK. It's the whole sector drifting toward the state. Like a company town, but with more security badges.
And there's a detail about the new Yandex.
Exactly. For its entire history as a public company, over a decade on NASDAQ, Yandex never paid a single dividend. Every ruble of profit went back into R&D, expansion, new products. That's what growth companies do.
That's what growth companies do.
You reinvest because you believe the future is worth more than the present. That's what makes a tech company different from a utility.
And then?
Then, in 2024, under new ownership, new management, new political reality, they announce their first ever dividend.
After 13 years of every ruble goes back into R&D, suddenly the piggy bank's open.
13 years. And the numbers? Well, let me just give you the numbers. Net income in 2024, about $125 million. Dividend payout? $645 million.
Sorry, 645 out of 125? I want their accountant.
5 times what they earned. And in 2025, they do it again. About $884 million in net income, around $820 million paid out. Over 90% of profit straight out the door.
For a company that used to pour every spare ruble into the next big bet, ride hailing, delivery, fintech, cloud, 13 years of invest in the future. And suddenly, the future can wait.
And remember who's catching the checks. The management fund, about 50 senior employees, holds roughly 22% of all Yandex shares.
50 people, 22% of the whole company.
On 2 years of dividends alone, that's around $330 million landing in their accounts. Roughly $6.5 million per person.
Per person? That's a pretty good year for corporate karaoke.
Per person. And that's dividends only, not their cash compensation, not the underlying stake, which at current Moscow exchange valuations is worth several times more.
That's not a dividend policy. That's a cash out with a corporate letterhead.
And here's what makes it click. This is textbook resource company behavior. Gazprom, Rosneft, monopolies that extract, distribute, and don't lose sleep over innovation.
And Yandex?
Holds 67% of search. Dominates ride-hailing. Captive market. No real competition. Generous dividends. The tech company has become an oil well, just without the drilling rigs.
Instead of hydrocarbons, they're extracting clicks. Gazprom with a search bar. Same pipeline, different flow.
Same playbook, different commodity. And here's the latest twist. May 5th, 2026. Yandex's board approves a 50 billion ruble buyback of its own shares. Explicitly, the press release says, to motivate engineers.
Hang on. Cash for shareholders, cash for executives, and now cash for retention. After the salary budget had already been spent on dividends? That's some Olympic-level financial gymnastics.
The circle closes neatly.
So they paid themselves out the front door and are now writing checks at the back door to keep the actual engineers from leaving. Who's left to lock up?
And when a company that never distributed profits suddenly starts writing checks that dwarf its own earnings to shareholders who got their stakes in a state-orchestrated restructuring, the charitable reading is they've run out of future to invest in.
And the less charitable one?
That this was always the point. Eating the seed corn. Cashing out tomorrow to pay for today.
That ex-Yandex badge is starting to look less like a credential and more like a survivor's tattoo. Cue the balalaika, Gregory.
But before we take a breath, companies left, the state consumed what remained. Capital concentrated in a handful of hands. So where does all that government money actually go? After the break. So, here's our intermission. We've just walked you through how a state can hollow out a technology ecosystem and repurpose it for control. No sponsors yet. Apparently, the systematic destruction of tech sectors isn't prime ad territory. But if your company has a taste for gallows humor, our inbox is open. We'll even throw in a commemorative mug.
Very niche, very on brand. We accept offers in any convertible currency, barter, or crates of vintage microchips. If you're a retro hardware collector, call us.
In the meantime, Patreon. For bonus episodes, deeper dives, and the juicy bits that didn't make it into the main feed, that's where to find us. Links below.
And don't forget our music playlist, curated Soviet and Russian hits for every mood. Because every historic collapse deserves a soundtrack, preferably with an accordion.
Back in a moment. Or, as they say in tech, please hold while we reboot. Don't touch that dial, unless it's state property. Welcome back. Before the break, we laid out the wreckage. Companies gone, state in charge, capital stacked in a few pockets. The government says it's investing in IT, trillions of rubles, national projects, digital sovereignty. But where does all that money actually go? Investing in IT sounds grand until you peek in the shopping cart. Let's talk hardware. More than 90% of Russia's microelectronics imports now come from China.
Intel and AMD?
Official imports plunged. Intel down 81%, AMD down 95%. Some chips still leak in through Hong Kong and Dubai. And here's the punchline. After sanctions cut off official distributors, defect rates on Chinese chips hit 40%. That's 20 times the pre-war level.
40%? So 2 out of 5 chips just don't work?
2 out of 5. Import substitution now means buying defect-prone Chinese stock through gray market resellers, or routing Western chips through Hong Kong at mystery markups. The supply chain isn't substituted, just more expensive and less reliable.
A hidden tax on every engineering project. Nothing says sovereignty like a sticker slapped over the QC failure rate.
And the homegrown programs, Elbrus, Baikal, are now cautionary tales. Elbrus is the slow-motion collapse story. In 2021, Sber tested it and rejected it as unsuitable. February 2022, TSMC stops serving Russia. Elbrus loses its foundry. No Russian plant can make 16-nanometer silicon. By September 2024, MCST, the company behind it, gets placed under external management.
Which is?
The closest thing to bankruptcy a strategically protected firm is allowed to be. Here's the irony prize. The next generation Elbrus, due in 2026, will reportedly be made in China outright, with the Russian government paying half the bill.
The national champion processor, made abroad.
Possibly always. Baikal Electronics gave up on its own chip packaging after discovering that about half the processors packaged in Russia came out defective.
Micron's the only fab left, right?
Micron. And it's still making chips at 90 nanometers.
Where Intel was in 2004.
2 decades behind in production. And here's where it gets really grim. Russia's first domestically built lithography tool, just now entering tests in Zelenograd, can only make 350 nanometer chips. That's the process Intel and AMD used in 1995.
3 decades behind in equipment. You know what gets me, though? I know engineers who worked on Elbrus. Real people. They knew the constraints, they knew the odds, and they tried anyway. This isn't a story about lazy people. That's what makes it worse.
It is. And on the software side, here's where it gets almost poetic in its irony. Russia's domestic software registry, 950 entries in 2016, 30,000 by 2025. 30,000.
The government made everyone switch, right?
Yes! Suddenly, everyone's furiously writing replacement software. Email clients, office suites, CRMs, project management tools. It's a national hackathon to reinvent the wheel. Only square this time.
But let me push back a little. 30,000 entries. That's not nothing. Some of those products might actually be decent. Isn't there value in having your own stack? Even a rough one?
In principle, sure. But timing is everything. And this might be the cruelest irony of all. While Russia spends trillions writing knockoff versions of Microsoft Office, Slack, Jira, Dina, you've seen the AI agent discourse?
SaaS is dead. You hear it everywhere now.
Everywhere. The argument, whole categories of business software, CRM, ERP, project management, HR, are being hollowed out. Klarna axed Salesforce and Workday, replacing them with AI. The interfaces people use daily are becoming API layers for agents to chat with. The very software Russia is frantically copying? It's being eaten alive. Not in 5 years, right now.
So, Russia is spending a decade and trillions of rubles to build yesterday. It's a nostalgia project with a 1 trillion ruble price tag.
It's like watching someone painstakingly copy an encyclopedia by hand while everyone else just asks AI for the answer. The effort is real. The dedication is real. The outcome? irrelevant by design. You can't win today by recreating yesterday's software.
And that's assuming the copies even work.
Spoiler, they mostly don't. Putin signed a decree. All critical infrastructure must switch to domestic software by January 1st, 2025. 4 months before the deadline, a BISA InfoWatch survey of Russian companies found only 7% had actually made the transition. Another 8% said they'd be ready in time.
So 15% at best.
15% at best. The deadline came and went. The government quietly pushed it to 2028, with an option to extend to 2030. Which, if you squint, sounds a lot like never.
Stick a Russian flag on it. Call it sovereignty.
And even Yandex's own AI story has a punchline. Yandex GPT Pro, genuinely decent for Russian language tasks, but priced curiously. On Yandex's own cloud, DeepSeek charges about a third of Yandex GPT Pro's input price. On DeepSeek's own platform, the gap balloons to more than 20 times.
20 times cheaper? That's not a discount. That's a different universe.
20 times. And Claude Sonnet 4.6, the Western flagship most listeners actually use, undercuts Yandex GPT Pro by more than half on input. Even Claude Opus 4.6, Anthropic's premium tier, is cheaper than Yandex GPT Pro at the input end.
So the national champion is the expensive option, in its own house. And more expensive on input than Western flagships in their own.
And here's the rumor that finishes the picture. According to several industry sources, starting in 2026, Yandex will give every developer and many other employees a $200 a month allowance for tokens on Claude.
Wait. Claude, Anthropic, who officially does not sell to Russian firms?
Officially does not sell to Russian firms. The Russian government is busy throttling the open internet. And yet, somehow, the country's leading tech company has secured contracts for vast quantities of Claude tokens for thousands of its developers. Welcome to the paradox economy.
Hard to verify.
We can't verify it, but if true, it's the most honest commentary on Russian AI sovereignty you'll find.
And meanwhile, the broader economy?
Is squeezing the life out of the sector. The central bank key rate hit 21% in late 2024, the highest in 20 years. It's down to 15.5% by early 2026, but commercial loans still run at 20 to 24. At those rates, your loan grows faster than your company.
You don't build a startup with that. You build a spreadsheet explaining your own demise, maybe with a pie chart for extra pain.
GDP growth crashed from nearly 5% in 2024 to 1% in 2025. 630 IT companies entered bankruptcy proceedings in the first 11 months of 2025 alone, up 28% year on year. The MOEX IT index fell by about a quarter, the worst performing sector on the Moscow exchange.
And with venture capital extinct, if you're a startup in Russia right now, there's no capital. You literally cannot fund a company. Unless your uncle is a Kovalchuk. In that case, congratulations.
Which brings us, at last, to where all this hits real people. The labor market. Brace yourself. Let's talk about what it's really like to be a living, breathing human working in Russian IT in 2026. Forget the macro stats. The employer rankings tell the real story.
Which ranking?
Haber, Russia's answer to Hacker News, the platform developers actually trust. Every year, they publish most attractive IT employers. Developer surveys, not corporate PR, real ground truth.
And Yandex on it?
In 2024, Yandex was 12th. By 2025, 29. 17 spots down in a single year.
17 spots in a single year? What happened?
Everything at once. The restructuring gutted morale. The best people left, or were pushed out. The ones who stayed got reshuffled under new management, with unclear mandates. And on top of that, governance went black box.
How so?
In 2022, the EU sanctioned Tigran Khudaverdyan. He was Valoj's deputy, appointed CEO on the very same day. He resigned from all official positions.
And?
The European General Court later upheld the sanctions for a specific, documented reason. Despite the resignation, one name kept showing up: Khudaverdyan. He stayed tied to Yandex as a consultant to its fund of public interests.
So formally out, informally in.
And inside the company, the widely held belief is the bond runs deeper still. No title, no board seat, but still calling the shots.
So the person running Russia's biggest tech company has no formal role. That's not corporate governance. Rule by handshake.
And it filters down. When the leadership itself is opaque, everything becomes opaque. Performance reviews, promotions, strategy. People can feel it. The Haber survey flagged exactly this. Opaque reviews and below-market salaries were the top reasons for the drop.
Below market salaries. At a company that just paid out nearly 90% of its profit in dividends. So there's money for shareholders, but not for the people actually writing the code.
That's the picture. And remember, the shareholders include management. So the same people who set the salary budget are also collecting dividend checks. That's what you call a perfect circle.
Okay, but that's Yandex, a company that just went through a forced restructuring. How representative is that? Maybe the rest of the sector is doing fine?
Let's check. VK is even worse. 15th in 2024, 50th in 2025. Attractiveness score down from 73 to 46%. This is a company that used to wrestle Yandex for top talent. Now, it can't even compete with a flight search engine.
VK dropped from top 15 to 50th in 1 year. 95 billion ruble loss, CEO's dad running the presidential administration. Imagine the Glassdoor review. Great canteen, terrible dynasty.
And here's the genuinely poetic part. The #1 IT employer in Russia in 2025, the most attractive place to work, period, is AviaSales. Yes, the flight search engine.
AviaSales, which, let's be clear, isn't really a Russian company. It's a flight search service, remote first, founded by a Russian, but the operation is global. The team distributed.
Median IT salary at #2 Avito, about $53,000 a year, 371,000 rubles a month. The country's highest.
But AviaSales isn't #1 for the money.
Right. It's remote first. You can work from anywhere. Literally anywhere.
So the best IT employer in Russia is...
Literally a ticket out of Russia. The airport lounge is the new IT office. That's not just a perk, that's an escape hatch.
That's not an anecdote. That's a diagnosis. Paging Dr. Freud.
And the real problem isn't just one company. It's that the market has consolidated. If you're unhappy at your job, where do you go?
Right. Before, if Yandex went sour, you could jump to JetBrains. If Sper got political, you could try Miro. Now those exits are closed.
So what's left? Yandex under new management. Spared with its GigaChat ambitions. VK burning cash under the Kirienko dynasty. And a shrinking mid-tier.
Picking between different flavors of state. Take your pick. Monopoly, monopoly, or monopoly. At least the cafeteria changes.
And here's the cruel irony. In 2022 and 2023, right after the mass exodus, salaries in IT were skyrocketing. If you stayed, you got promoted at a pace that would have taken 5 years in peacetime.
Seniors left. Suddenly you're a team lead.
Your team lead left? Congratulations, you're a director. Salaries jumped 15–20% a year. It was musical chairs with business cards.
So the people who stayed felt like geniuses. The ones who panicked and fled were the fools.
Exactly. And the government was saying the same thing. See, the sector is fine. Salaries are up. Growth is up. The alarmists were wrong. It was intoxicating. Fast promotions, fat paychecks, official validation. Everything pointed to staying as the smart bet.
And then?
And then, the music stopped. By 2026, salary growth flatlined. Median IT pay in 2025? About 183,000 rubles a month, roughly $28,000 a year. Unchanged from 2024 in nominal terms, but inflation chewed up real incomes.
So real incomes are actually dropping.
For the first time since the boom began. In Moscow, the median is about 230,000 rubles. In the regions, 159,000.
And how does that compare internationally? What does a Russian developer actually earn in global terms?
Senior Russian developers now earn 3 to 4 times less than their US equivalents. A few years ago, the gap was 2 to 1. The ruble's wild ride stretched it.
And if you have any international options, the maths does itself.
Brain drain on fast forward. And the market itself is brutal. By early 2026, HH.RU's IT index hit 22 resumes per active vacancy. The platform says anything above 12 is extreme competition.
Nearly twice the extreme threshold.
Vacancy volumes collapsed too. April 2026 saw 35% fewer IT openings than April 2025, which itself was 24% below April 2024. The market is at half its 2024 volume. Even mid-level and senior developers, used to inbound offers, are job hunting again. The squeeze, once a junior's problem, has climbed the ladder.
A stampede at the bottom that's climbing up the ladder.
And here's a labor market twist you won't hear at any government press conference. Dina, what would you guess is the single most in-demand IT skill in Russia right now? Not the PR answer, the real one.
I'd say cloud infrastructure, DevOps, AI wizardry.
1C. Drumroll, please. The punchline to a 2-decade journey.
Drumroll, please. Oh, God. 1C. Of course it is. Russia's answer to the eternal spreadsheet.
1C, for the uninitiated, is an enterprise accounting system, straight out of the 90s. After the foreign exodus, it now runs about 80% of Russia's ERP market.
In demand?
By December 2025, more than 37,000 vacancies were open for 1C specialists. That's more demand than for Python, JavaScript, or Java developers. 5 vacancies for every resume. Senior architects and team leads earn up to 650,000 rubles a month, north of 80 grand a year.
Not AI, not machine learning, not blockchain.
An accounting system from the 90s. That's the real face of Russian IT today. Not AI, not machine learning, not blockchain. Just spreadsheets, payroll, and nostalgia.
1C is to Russian IT what croissant delivery is to Russian innovation. The thing that actually exists, quietly hiding behind the shiny slogans. Imagine the LinkedIn update. Ex-Yandex, now 1C consultant. From building the future to debugging someone's payroll spreadsheet. This is the new normal.
Let's step back. After all these numbers and stories, it's tempting to see Russian IT as a tragic victim, just minding its own business until history crashed through the door in 2022.
But that's not what happened.
Exactly. When I started pulling this data together, I expected a war story. Sanctions, bombs, the usual suspects.
But the cracks were there already.
Exactly. The consumer over builder bias. No real VC culture. The state's pull on every successful company. 2022 didn't cause the collapse. It exposed it. Like yanking the tablecloth off a table that never had legs.
A very nicely set table, to be fair. Beautiful plates. Shame about the gravity.
Beautiful plates, no legs. A Potemkin banquet. All surface, no foundation. The banquet's over. The table's already gone.
So where does it go from here?
And here's the real twist. Where is all this heading? Digitization, state control, domestic software mandates, all that data in state-friendly companies. The trajectory isn't innovation. It's surveillance.
Go on. I'm bracing myself.
Russia's building a near-perfect digital control infrastructure. Electronic documents, employment, property, health, education, all centralized, all state-accessible.
Digital IDs, digital signatures, government portals, everything tracked.
And then there's Max, VK's new super app. The concept's straight from China's WeChat. Mandatory pre-install on every smartphone sold in Russia since September. Government services, digital ID baked in. Run by the children of the ruling elite.
So the state builds the surveillance infrastructure, forces everyone onto domestic platforms, controls who runs them, and calls it digital sovereignty.
And the population knows. It works around the wall. For now. YouTube isn't accessible without a VPN. Roskomnadzor has blocked nearly 500 VPN services. From May 2026, mobile carriers charge 150 rubles per gigabyte for VPN traffic. In March 2026, courts began convicting internet providers for letting YouTube traffic through.
Convicting providers.
Convicting providers. And here's the irony. Even the surveillance frame doesn't capture it. The consumer-facing digitalization Russia genuinely built, banking apps, contactless payments, 15-minute deliveries, seamless taxis, is unraveling in real time.
Because
Because the state is choking the connectivity those services need. Mobile shutdowns trigger banking outages in Moscow and St. Petersburg. ATMs are vanishing from streets faster than new ones appear. Over 1 trillion rubles in cash withdrawn from circulation in 3 months. Mobile carriers now warn customers to carry cash for the May holidays.
the marble lobby was real. The lease has run out.
And the people who hold the lease don't seem bothered. Which brings us back to directionality. Russian IT isn't being built to generate economic value, to export technology, or to make Russian business competitive.
So what is it built for?
To make the population more legible, more trackable, more controllable. Maybe not intentionally by every engineer, but structurally, inevitably. The real import substitution isn't software for software. It's trading digital anonymity for perfect state transparency.
So what is Russian IT, really?
Not an ecosystem. Not a sector. Not even an industry anymore. It's a control mechanism.
With programmers attached.
With programmers attached.
You know what hit me most working on this? The speed.
Not the decline. You expected that.
But the speed of it. Companies built over 20 years, restructured in months. Employer rankings collapsing overnight. VC money vanishing in 3 years. Things you thought were permanent? Just tissue paper. One gust, and it's gone.
And when you're inside, you barely notice.
You adjust. Find workarounds. Tell yourself it's temporary. Then suddenly, the landscape's unrecognizable.
And that's the lesson that goes way beyond Russia.
The state devours the last bit of free market, and it doesn't look like destruction.
It looks like consolidation. Orderly. New names, new logos, big numbers in budget reports.
But underneath, the things that made it work. Independence, market discipline, global connection.
Gone. And once that's gone, the numbers are just accounting entries.
Digital autarky.
Digital autarky. With all the costs autarky always carries, just with more code, fewer imports.
And here's what I keep circling back to: the talent. That's the tragedy. And weirdly, the hope.
Russia's mathematical Olympiad teams still take 5 gold medals every year, competing remotely from a sealed room in Vladivostok, banned from team rankings since 2022.
5 golds from a sealed room. The talent's extraordinary. Still is. You can't nationalize genius.
But talent without ecosystem is emigration.
Consumer products without B2B? Marble lobby on rented land. It looks impressive until it rains.
State investment without market discipline is buying someone else's hardware.
And state digitization without freedom? That's just surveillance. Doesn't matter how shiny the interface is.
And ex-Yandex on LinkedIn?
Not a credential. An epitaph. Maybe even a warning. For anyone listening, especially if you think it can't happen where you are.
I should be honest about something. I know this episode has been bleak. Maybe even a little hostile. It isn't. Or at least, it's not meant to be.
Go on.
I'm among those who spent years watching companies like Yandex and believing they represented something genuinely new for the country. Not just better products, a different way of working. Open offices, flat hierarchies, the assumption that a good engineer's opinion mattered more than a deputy director's rank.
And for you, growing up where you grew up,
For someone who grew up where corporate culture meant something entirely different, this felt like transformation. Like the future arrived ahead of schedule.
and then it was gone.
And then it was gone. That's what makes the speed so hard to process. It's not an abstraction. I watched it happen. Companies that took a decade to build trust and competence got restructured into something unrecognizable in months. I'm not analyzing this from a safe academic distance.
No?
I'm grieving it.
That ex-Yandex badge. It isn't an epitaph for the company. Companies restructure, rebrand, survive.
Then for what?
For the possibility. The possibility Russia could have been a global technology power. That the talent, ambition, the mathematical tradition could have built something lasting. Something that didn't need to flee to Amsterdam, San Francisco, or Dubai just to breathe.
And the mechanism that killed it? State capture, captive markets, the confusion of control for competence, the slow substitution of loyalty for merit. That's not uniquely Russian. The ingredients are available everywhere.
And Russia?
Just arrived at the destination first. One thing before we go. This isn't based on academic research. No definitive books yet. What you've heard is our own analysis, drawn from public data, news, filings, rankings. We've tried to be precise with numbers and honest about the gaps. And the gaps are everywhere.
You might have noticed we barely touched AI and automation. That's deliberate.
They deserve their own episode. We're working on it now. The GPU gap, the model race, the automation question. 2 worlds of AI. How Russia's trying to stay in the game, and how it's falling out. If you thought this story was grim, wait for that one.
Cheerful as always.
We do our best.
Stay curious. Keep your LinkedIn profiles honest. See you next time, unless the state nationalizes the podcast first, or unless we're all debugging payroll spreadsheets by then. Either way, we'll be here.